I always thought my life was pretty normal, just me, my mom, and our quiet little world. We had our routines, our weekend traditions, and the kind of bond that felt unbreakable. My mom was my hero growing up. She raised me on her own, worked 2 jobs, and somehow still had time to make my favorite dinner every Friday night. She always told me the truth, or at least, I thought she did. But that belief shattered the day I stumbled across something I was never meant to see. It was like opening a door that could never be closed again. It all started with something as innocent as cleaning the attic. Mom had asked me to grab an old photo album for her birthday slideshow. She said it was in a box labeled family stuff, buried somewhere under dusty blankets and forgotten holiday decorations. I didn't think much of it, until I found a small, locked box tucked behind some old suitcases. It didn't have a label. It didn't even look like it belonged there. My curiosity got the best of me. I don't know what pushed me to do it, but I picked the lock with a hairpin. I wasn't expecting much, maybe old letters or keepsakes. But what I found inside flipped my entire world upside down. Inside the box were photographs, documents, and a few letters. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. But the more I read, the more my stomach turned. There were names I'd never heard of before, places my mom had never mentioned, and a photograph, an old, grainy photo of my mom with a man I didn't recognize. She looked younger, happier, but also different. And the way the man was holding her hand, it wasn't casual. It was intimate. Loving. It wasn't my dad. I had never known my dad, and whenever I asked, Mom would say he left before I was born and that she didn't like talking about him. But this suggested there was a lot more to the story. At first, I told myself maybe it was just an old friend, or someone from before I was born. But something about the way she looked at him in that picture, it just didn't sit right with me. I needed answers, but I didn't want to confront her right away. So I started digging. Quietly. I searched for the names in the letters, tried piecing together timelines, cross-checking dates with the things Mom had told me over the years. And the more I looked, the more cracks started forming in the version of our life I thought I knew. I started noticing little things about my mom I'd never really paid attention to before, how she always changed the subject when I asked about her past, how she got defensive whenever someone mentioned our family. One night, I brought up an old memory I'd found in one of the letters, pretending it was something a relative had told me. The look on her face was instant, panic, like someone had just turned on a light in a dark room. And that's when I knew she was hiding something big. Something life-changing. But I had no idea just how deep the truth went, or how much it would change the way I saw everything. My childhood, my family, even myself. That night, after she went to bed, I opened her closet. I remembered seeing her lockbox key on her keychain earlier that day. My hands were shaking as I turned the key. What I found inside. I still don't know how to explain it. All I can say is, once I saw what was really in there, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. And that's where everything really began. Inside the lockbox were more photos, some of them torn at the edges, like someone had tried to get rid of them but couldn't quite follow through. There were letters, too, but they were different from the ones I found in the attic. These were personal. Some were handwritten, others typed. One of them had a date from just 3 years ago. That's when I realized whatever this was, it wasn't just some long-forgotten part of her past. It was something ongoing. Something she was still hiding now. One envelope stood out from the rest. It was addressed to her, but the return name made my heart race. It was the same name that had appeared in the attic letter. I'd assumed it was a dead end. But clearly, this person had stayed in contact with her. I didn't recognize the name, and definitely not the handwriting. The letter inside was short, just a few lines. But it mentioned me. Not by name, but in a way that made it obvious. "Does he know yet?" it said. "He's going to find out sooner or later." I sat there frozen, that one line replaying in my head over and over. What didn't I know? And why was this stranger talking about me like they had a say in my life? The more I read, the more questions piled up. Some letters mentioned a place called Fairview, some kind of town or neighborhood, I wasn't sure. One mentioned a date that matched the year I was born, and another included a faded copy of a birth certificate, but it wasn't mine. Or maybe it was. The name was different, but the birthday matched. Everything felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, and each piece I found just made things more confusing. I kept thinking back to all the moments when Mom would dodge certain topics, especially anything about before I was 5 or 6. I always thought it was just because she'd had a tough time back then, raising me alone. But now I was starting to wonder if there was more to it than that. Like maybe I wasn't even who I thought I was. Or maybe she wasn't. In school, I'd always been told our family tree was short and simple. No cousins, no grandparents I could remember, no aunts or uncles who ever visited. Whenever classmates asked why it was just me and my mom, I'd shrug and say, "It's always been this way." And that was the truth, until now. Suddenly it felt like there was a whole other world just out of reach, one she'd kept hidden from me for a reason. And the worst part? I didn't know if she did it to protect me, or to protect herself. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling around that photo of the mystery man and the look on my mom's face in it. There was something in her eyes, almost like a warning. As if she knew this day would come. I started replaying every conversation we'd ever had, looking for cracks in the story. There were a lot more than I expected. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. I ate breakfast with her, asked about her day like usual, but everything felt fake. She smiled like she always did, but I kept wondering, was that smile real? Or was it just part of the story she wanted me to believe? I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that I had to find out who that man was, what the letters meant, and why my own identity suddenly felt like a lie. And deep down, I was starting to realize, the truth might be something I'm not ready to face. Over the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything. Every time my mom talked to me, I found myself watching her more closely, listening for slips, waiting for something to reveal itself. I'd always seen her as this steady, honest figure in my life. Now I was second-guessing every word she said. The hidden box, the letters, the photograph, all of it was burning in the back of my mind. And Fairview. That name kept echoing like a whisper I couldn't shut off. I started searching online. Fairview turned out to be a small town about 2 hours away. Not exactly a place we had any reason to be connected to, or so I thought. But the more I looked, the more strange things started to line up. There was a family in Fairview with the same last name as one of the people in the letters. They owned a small mechanic shop that had been around for decades. I even found an old article with a blurry picture of the shop's opening back in the day, and there he was. The same man from the photograph with my mom. He looked younger, but it was definitely him. This whole time, I had been trying to figure out who he was. Now I had a name. And once I did, it got worse. I found an archived forum thread where someone had posted asking about him years ago. They called him the guy who disappeared. Just vanished from town one day. No goodbyes, no explanation. Some people said he left on his own. Others hinted that something darker happened. The weirdest part? That disappearance happened right around the time I was born. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not yet. But I did message someone from the forum who claimed to know the man. They replied late that night with one simple line, "You're not the first one to go digging into this." That message alone made my chest tighten. It felt like I'd crossed some invisible line, and now there was no going back. Meanwhile, things at home felt even more off. I noticed my mom checking her phone more often, like she was waiting for a call. One night, I caught her looking at that same photo I'd seen in the box. She was sitting alone in the kitchen, holding it with both hands like it meant everything to her. I stood in the hallway watching, frozen. I wanted to ask her who he was. I wanted to demand answers. But I didn't. I was afraid of what she might say, or what she wouldn't. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a secret from the past. It was something that was still alive now, still unfolding. And I had a feeling I wasn't the only one caught in the middle of it. The more I dug into the past, the more I felt like I was stepping into a web of lies that had been carefully constructed to keep me in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that my mom knew exactly what I was up to, and she wasn't telling me anything because she knew I wasn't ready to hear it. The tension between us grew every day. There were times when she'd look at me with such sadness in her eyes, it almost felt like she was apologizing without saying a word. But there were other times when she'd get distant, cold even, like she was shutting herself off completely from me. I was driving myself crazy trying to figure out how to confront her without making it worse. That night, I could feel something big was coming. The atmosphere at home had shifted. My mom's nerves were on edge, and I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was about to happen. I was sitting in my room when I heard the faintest sound coming from downstairs, a car door closing. Then, another sound. A knock on the door. My heart raced. I wasn't expecting anyone. I didn't even know we had visitors this late. My first instinct was to stay quiet, not to get involved, but I had no choice. I couldn't ignore the feeling that whatever was happening right now was connected to everything I'd uncovered. I peeked out of my room and saw my mom standing in the doorway, talking to someone I couldn't see. Her voice was strained, but she was trying to sound calm. The moment I heard a name mentioned, Fairview, I froze. That was it. That's when I knew everything was about to change. My mom's secret was finally out in the open. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Suddenly, the person at the door stepped forward into the light. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the man from the photo, the one I'd been searching for. But there was something different about him now. He didn't look like a stranger. He looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment. And he wasn't alone. There was another person with him, someone I didn't recognize, but their presence made the air feel heavier. The room felt suffocating. The truth was finally within reach, but the question was I ready to face it? As the man stepped into the light, my heart was pounding in my ears. I couldn't move. His presence filled the room, and I couldn't stop staring at him. My mom's voice wavered, but she quickly regained her composure. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, almost pleading. The man looked at her, then at me. There was no shock in his eyes. He didn't seem surprised to see me standing there, watching them. In fact, it felt like he'd been expecting it. He took a step forward, and for a split second, I thought he was going to say something comforting, something that would clear all the confusion. But instead, he just looked at me with a mixture of regret and something darker, something I couldn't quite place. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out," he said, his voice low. "But it's time, isn't it?" My mom's face tightened. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Not like this. Then the other person stepped forward, the one I hadn't seen clearly before. It was a woman, older than my mom, with sharp eyes and an unsettling calmness. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, then my mom. It's too late for secrets now, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Who are you? I finally managed to say, though my throat felt dry, as if I hadn't spoken in days. I was beyond the point of hiding my shock and fear. The man looked at me, and his eyes softened, like he was about to give me the answer I'd been chasing for weeks. But before he could speak, the woman spoke again, this time in a tone that made my skin crawl. You don't understand. Everything you've been told is a lie. The truth about your father, about who you are, it's worse than you think. The ground beneath me seemed to shift. I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and suddenly, I didn't know which way was up. I couldn't breathe as the woman's words hung in the air. The truth about your father, she repeated, her eyes locked onto mine with unsettling certainty. You think he left, but he didn't. He never wanted to leave you. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made everything feel off. The man beside her took a deep breath and stepped forward. I'm your father, he said, and for a moment everything went still. The world tilted. I felt like I might fall right through the floor. No, I said, shaking my head. That's not possible. You're the man in the photo. You disappeared. My words faltered. I couldn't process what he was saying. The man's face softened with regret. I didn't disappear. I was forced to leave. They told me I had no choice. Your mother, she couldn't know what they were doing. I had to protect you both. My mom finally spoke, her voice cracking. I didn't want you to be part of this. I didn't want you involved, but you have to understand, what we did, what happened, it wasn't just about us. It's about you, too. The woman who had been standing silently stepped forward. You've been part of something much bigger than you realize. The truth, your real identity, it's connected to a much darker past. You're not just a victim of our mistakes, you're caught in the middle of something that's been planned for years. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. It was too much to absorb. But as I looked at the woman, I realized something else. She wasn't just telling me the truth, she was part of the reason it had all happened. Your real family, she said with a cold smile, isn't who you think it is. And then, everything I thought I knew about myself shattered completely. I stood there, completely stunned, my world crumbling with every word they said. Your real family, the woman's words echoed in my head. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I could barely process it all. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my life, had been built on lies. The man, my father, stepped closer, his expression filled with guilt. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted you to know the truth this way. But it's time you understood. My mom, her eyes filled with tears, looked at me with a sorrowful expression. It wasn't just about protecting you, it was about protecting everyone. I never wanted to bring you into this world I was trying to escape. The woman spoke again, her tone colder now. You've been caught in the middle of a much bigger game than your parents ever realized. There's more at play here than you understand. But you still have a choice. I stood there, the weight of their words pressing down on me. I had always felt like an outsider in my own life, but now it all made sense. My mom's evasions, the secrets, the strange tension in our home, it was all part of something bigger. I finally found my voice. What happens now? I asked, feeling the weight of everything. The man and the woman exchanged a look, and for the first time, they seemed united in their purpose. "Now," he said, "you decide. You can walk away, or you can join us. But either way, your life will never be the same again." As they turned to leave, I realized something. The truth wasn't just about the past. It was about what I would choose to do with it.